All right. We are starting soon. Here we go. Let's get this thing started on this afternoon encouragement where we can encourage you and encourage you in the scriptures and be able to have the perspective, right? This is what we need. I put on a notification, there's this unrest and all this distress. And no doubt if you're watching the news or you're on social media, there is just so much unrest on all sides, in every way. And the only thing that remains solid, unwavering, is the Lord and His Word. And so we want to find our grounding there, the Lord and His Word. And it's interesting because, we have just been taking our time. I've been just, every day taking a different psalm, and when I have opportunity and personally just been reading through it, meditating in it, and so much of it has been so applicable in so many ways, with going through the emotional roller coasters of life. And, David's going to make a couple statements here today on just how, he's going to use the word transient, that we are as humans, and that are the line here that I have underlined in Psalm 39, verse 5, surely every man at his best is a mere breath. And there is a certain vanity in this life. And the vanity in this life is if, under the sun, the S-U-N, but there's not vanity if we're living under the sun, the S-O-N. And so that's where we need the perspective shift. That's my goal, to just bring a word of encouragement, a short word of encouragement from the scriptures to you wherever you're at and whenever you're listening or tuning in. There's not much announcement to be made. We had a great time on Sunday with our drive-in church. We're making plans for the next experience there, and working through all those details. That's great. We're looking forward to partnering with the Lake Stevens Food Bank. It's happening, and you should have received an email from Linda Wright if you were involved with that and signed up to volunteer for that. And it should be a great opportunity that we will be partnering with the Lake Stevens Food Bank and helping to serve the community in that way. And you can be looking forward to that. And then don't forget, there's opportunity to give to a fundraiser. The Pregnancy Resource Center is going on right now. It's typically that baby bottle fundraiser where we physically collect these baby bottles. We fill them with loose change. We turn them in, and there's a donor that matches. And so obviously we haven't gotten the physical baby bottles, but you can go online and do that. So to the Pregnancy Resource Center's website, you go online, donate towards that. Works great. All right, let's jump in. Psalms 39, David says, I said I will guard my ways, that I may not sin with my tongue. I will guard my mouth as with a muzzle, while the wicked are in my presence. David had many experiences where he felt in some ways that maybe the enemy was oppressing him. There are even times that he prays and he cries out that he feels like the Lord's heavy hand was upon him. It was almost like he has a complaint against God for his current plight. And so he makes this statement, I'm going to guard my ways that I may not sin with my tongue. There was a certain action that he wanted to take, but he knew it would be better if he would guard his mouth and not speak against the Lord. But he says, as I was mute, verse 2, and silent, I refrained even from good, and my sorrow grew worse. My heart was hot within me. While I was musing, the fire burned. And so it's sort of this bubbling up. He was containing these, expressions of emotions and feelings, and maybe with a good attitude or a good purpose to not sin against the Lord. But as he was doing that, it was bubbling up within him that it became worse. He says the sorrow was growing worse, and there was a fire burning within. So then I spoke with my tongue, he says at the end of verse 3. And here, look what he says here. Lord, make me to know my end. What is the extent of my days? Let me know how transient I am. Behold, you have made my days as handbreadths, and my lifetime as nothing in your sight. Surely every man at his best is a mere breath. Surely every man walks about as a phantom. Surely they make an uproar for nothing. He amasses riches and does not know who will gather them. This reminds me of a couple of different passages in the Bible. And immediately I think of Job and his experience and how he cries out to the Lord. And I think of Ecclesiastes, David's son, Solomon, as he recognizes that life under the sun, the S-U-N, is vanity. And I want to read this passage out of Job 14. I mean, if we had a couple hours here, we could just go through the whole entirety of the book of Job and really unpack this. But Job makes a similar statement here. And Job 14 says, man who is born of a woman is short-lived and full of turmoil. Is that how you feel? Life is short and it's difficult. He says, like a flower, he comes forth and withers. He also flees like a shadow and does not remain. You also open your eyes on him and bring him into judgment with yourself. Who can make the clean out of the unclean? No one. Since his days are determined, the number of his months is with you, and his limits you have set so that he cannot pass. Turn your gaze from him that he may rest until he fulfills his days like a hired man. Kind of this idea of gaze. David uses it actually in Psalm 39 too. It's sort of this gaze of death, this thing of judgment. He says, Job says in chapter 14, verse 7, where there's hope for a tree, when it gets cut down, then it will sprout again, and its shoots will not fail, though its roots will grow old in the ground, and its stump dies in the dry soil. At the scent of water, it will flourish and put forth sprigs like a plant. But a man dies and lies prostrate. Man expires, and where is he? And so when there's this focus on temporal, when there's a focus on the earthly, focus on this life only, this short life we live, there seems to be sort of this perspective of it's just vanity. I mean, it's, what hope is there? That's why we need an eternal hope. That's why we rely and we trust upon the work that Jesus Christ did for the work of our salvation, so that when it, who can make clean out of unclean? We are unclean, but because of Jesus we can become clean, and we have the hope of heaven, the hope of eternity, the hope of life beyond this life. He says, look over Ecclesiastes. Ecclesiastes is sort of a similar take. Ecclesiastes 1 says, the words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. What advantage does man have in all his work, which he does under the sun? The S-U-N. A generation goes and a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. Also, the sun rises and the sun sets, and the hastening to its place, it rises there again. blowing towards the south, then turning towards the north, and the wind continues swirling along, and on its circular course the wind returns. All the rivers flow up into the sea, yet the sea is not full. To the place where the rivers flow, they will flow again. All things are wearisome. Man is not able to tell it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor is the ear filled with hearing. That which has been is that which will be, and that which has been done is that which is done. There is nothing new under the sun. It seems like in this temporal world we live, we have these cycles of, I don't know how to say it exactly, the pitfalls of humanity in our flesh and our carnal nature, the cycles of tyranny, the cycles of oppression, the cycles of sin, really. And it, you look in the book of Judges, and there's this cycle where, they would trust God, and then they would, there'd be great times of provision, and then they would stray from God, and they would worship other gods, and then there would be oppression, and then they would turn to God, and then God would relieve them from their oppression, and they would praise God, and there'd be times of good, and then they would stray from God and worship other gods, and you know what I'm saying? There was this cycle, and you see it in this life we live, and as the longer we go on, you see these different cycles that happen, and I think, the writer here, Solomon, he's right. There's nothing new under the sun. And he ends this statement. It goes on and on. It's interesting. If you'd like to read it, you can just pause me or just go read the Bible if you want by yourself. Finish out chapter 1 and go into chapter 2. And Ecclesiastes 2, verse 11, it says, "Thus I considered all my activities which my hands had done, and the labor which I had exerted, and behold, all was vanity and striving after wind, and there was no profit under the sun." S-U-N. That's earthly. That's temporal. That's the here. That's the present. So what is my point? My point is, back to Psalms 39. There is no necessarily, profit. There is vanity here in the earthly. But in the heavenly, under the sun, the S-O-N, Jesus Christ, we can have hope. We can be freed. We can live in a way that is fulfilling, where we can, what our eyes can see would be enough. What our ears would hear would be enough, that we would be fulfilled and we would be satisfied. David says in Psalm 39, verse 7, after he sort of makes this statement, surely, verse 5, he says, "Every man at his best is mere breath, and surely every man walks about as a phantom." He amasses these riches, but he doesn't know who's going to gather them. And then verse 7, he says, "And now, Lord, for what do I wait? My hope is in you." If we're looking for meaning, if we're looking for discernment, we're looking for answers, looking for rest, it can only be found in the Lord. He says, "Deliver me," verse 8, "from all my transgressions." Remember this idea of transgressions, as we unpacked this a few days ago, is the idea of trespassing. We've crossed the line. "Deliver me from my transgressions. Make me not the reproach of the foolish. I become mute. I do not open my mouth, because it is you who have done it. Remove your plague from me because of the opposition of your hand. I am perishing." Verse 11, "With reproofs you chasten a man for iniquity." David recognizes that it is God who does bring discipline in our lives. And there is a purpose in this. And the Lord is capable, he says here in verse 11, "You consume as a moth what is precious to him. Surely every man is a mere breath." This challenges our value system. What do we value? What do we consider precious? It really pushes us to just recognize that although we may enjoy our time here on earth, I certainly do. I enjoy my family. I enjoy our activities. I enjoy the experiences that the Lord leads me on here. I really do. They are short. And our life is just a mere breath. And we need to have an eternal perspective. We need to have this heavenly perspective and not get so caught up in the earthly. He says, verse 12, hear my prayer, O Lord, and give ear to my cry. Do not be silent at my tears, for I am a stranger with you, a sojourner like my fathers. Turn your gaze away from me. Again, this gaze of death, this gaze of judgment, and that I may smile again before I depart and am no more. So David recognizes that his time on earth, he was just a sojourner. This was a temporary experience, and that there was going to be more to this. And so I just want to encourage you, and I think this is nothing new. It's just an encouragement for perspective, and to make sure that we keep the important things as important, and the less important, less important. And to recognize our transient state, that this isn't all there is. There's more. And we should be involved in the more. And our lives should be about that and include that. We can enjoy the things of the earth. We can enjoy the temporal things, but that we don't want to find them to be the most precious. We want the most precious to be the Lord and the work in his life and the presence of him in us and the community of believers around us, and then this hope of heaven that we have, a hope of eternity, and a hope that God will heal, and that he's near and dear to the brokenhearted, and that he will wipe away every tear, and that he will make things right, and that the Lord is for his creation. And he wants all men and women to draw unto him and call upon his name for salvation. Well, I hope this is encouraging to you, and that you would, as verse 7, you could say, now, Lord, for what do I wait? My hope is in you. Put your hope in the Lord Jesus and live that way. All right? God bless you guys, and we'll talk soon. See you later.